His name was Grant Mercer, former Marine Corps major, last survivor of Fort Dagger Line. The base had been a high-value target, strategic, hardened, and filled with some of Earth's best. Now it was ash. Grant had dug himself out of rubble and blood 2 days ago. He hadn't eaten. His left eye was swollen shut. But his heart still burned with a cold fire he couldn't describe. Rage didn't do it justice. Vengeance didn't either. The Thalrexians hadn't just attacked, they had cleansed. The word echoed in every emergency broadcast, every hacked comms signal the aliens left behind, cleansing of inferior systems. Grant had seen the cleansing up close. Families burnt alive inside collapsed bunkers, children gunned down for the sin of being born on Earth. And when it was over, they didn't occupy, they abandoned. As if Earth wasn't worth holding, just worth humiliating. Grant staggered through the ruins of what used to be Sector 4's command center, a place once alive with orders, reports, and boots hitting steel floors. Now, it was dust and bone. He carried a modified railgun, salvaged from a fallen comrade's corpse. Each time he gripped it, he thought of Captain Ridge, shot in the back while trying to protect evacuees. No funeral, no honor, just a body dumped into a crater. He wasn't alone. Survivors had scattered. There were whispers of a resistance forming in the ruins of San Fierro. Others said Antarctica's ice vaults had opened, letting loose black projects no government had ever admitted existed. But Grant wasn't waiting for a miracle. He was the consequence. If Earth was finished, so be it. But he would make damn sure someone paid before the lights went out. By nightfall, he'd reached the edge of a kill zone where drones patrolled in slow, lazy circles, as if daring anyone to resist. Grant crouched behind a scorched car shell, studying their pattern. They weren't perfect. Nothing was. The Thalrexians had underestimated Earth. That would be their second mistake. Their first was not killing Grant Mercer when they had the chance. He moved with brutal precision, a single shot to the left drone, EMP round, gone. The other didn't even register the loss before its core exploded in a silent flash. Grant moved fast. No ceremony, no shouting, no speeches. Just death. Efficient and merciless. Inside the cleared zone, he found a relay beacon, still blinking. A rare oversight. He plugged in an uplink module and waited. Static. More static. Then a ping. A voice came through, male, gravel-toned, desperate. Anyone receiving this transmission routed through Outpost V-13, Tactical Group Kilo 7 initiating counterinsurgency protocol. Grant, if you're alive, it's time. He stared at the relay. No smile. Just a hard nod. Kilo 7 had been a myth, even among soldiers. Black ops, off-book, and unofficial. But if they were reaching out, it meant one thing. Earth was done waiting for mercy. And Grant Mercer was ready to show the galaxy what no surrender really looked like. The relay tower blinked its last light as the signal died, leaving only the cold wind whispering through crumbled steel. Grant stood motionless for a long minute. Not in hesitation. He was memorizing the frequency, the coordinates, the tone of that voice. Kilo 7 was active. That meant Earth still had teeth, even if the body was bleeding out. He moved through the ruins like a ghost, taking back alleys and bombed-out buildings with muscle memory honed in desert combat and jungle trenches. The Thalrexians didn't expect foot movement this deep behind their artificial perimeter. They relied on intimidation, overwhelming firepower, and the psychological chokehold of mass slaughter. But Grant wasn't afraid. He wasn't anything anymore. Whatever emotion he'd felt 2 weeks ago when his platoon was vaporized and his fiancée's last words glitched through a burning comlink had been buried with them. He didn't cry, didn't scream. He just moved. One objective at a time. One more target, one more Thalrex skull to crush. until there was nothing left. He reached the drop point 2 hours before dawn. A train tunnel, forgotten since the collapse of the world's cities, served as the last confirmed meetup for Kilo 7's scattered cells. Grant descended into it slowly, rifle drawn. The air reeked of rot and wet concrete. He moved between rusted train husks and charred skeletal remains. Civilians, probably. Not worth saving in the eyes of their invaders. Or maybe they were executed by collaborators. It didn't matter anymore. At the tunnel's midpoint, a low hum vibrated the ground, barely perceptible. Then came the flash. Red laser sights flared on his chest. 3. No. 4. "Drop it, soldier," a voice barked, clipped and military. Grant didn't move. "I said drop it." He stepped forward instead. Slowly, intentionally. Name's Grant Mercer, Major, 3rd Battalion, Fort Dagger Line. Call sign, Steel Ghost. If you're Kilo 7, you know that name. A pause. Then another voice, deeper and older. "Steel Ghost is dead." Grant's lip curled. "Then your intel is as useless as the fleet that got glassed in orbit." Another pause. The lasers vanished. Out from the darkness stepped a man built like a tank, beard scraggly, eyes colder than space. He wore no rank insignia, just armor, worn and patched with mismatched plates. His team flanked him, 4 soldiers, armed to the teeth with black market tech and Dead Nation gear. "You're alive," the leader said. "Prove it wasn't a mistake." Grant nodded, stepped back, and reached into his belt pouch. From it, he pulled a bloody dog tag, the tag of Sergeant Darnell, one of Kilo 7's key liaisons at Fort Dagger Line. He tossed it at the leader's feet. "He died buying me 20 seconds to escape," Grant said. "I made it count." The man picked up the tag, studied it, then looked Grant in the eye. "Welcome to the goddamn war." They took him into the belly of the old station, a reinforced bunker hidden beneath the tunnel's end. Inside, there were people, fighters, survivors, engineers working on scavenged drones, medics patching up kids who looked like they'd never known peace, all of them armed, all of them angry. "This is Kilo 7 now," the leader said. "You don't like it, walk back into the ash." "I like it fine," Grant said. They gave him water first, then a ration bar, then silence until the briefing. The old war dog introduced himself as Briggs. No rank, no history, just Briggs. Grant didn't ask more. Everyone down here had ghosts. The fewer names, the fewer memories to get in the way of war. Briggs unrolled a dirty map of North America and pointed at a red-marked zone. "San Fierro was nuked last week, but before that, we smuggled out a cache. Coordinates here." He pointed to a location near the old Colorado mountain bunkers. "Inside it is a Thalrexian transcode beacon. We've been reverse engineering it to tap their comms. One burst transmission got through." He tapped another red circle. "Something's coming. A second wave. Bigger. Not extermination. Harvest. We don't know what they're collecting, but it ain't resources. It's people." Grant's jaw tightened. Slavery? Worse. Bioconversion. They've got tech that turns human tissue into hybrid soldiers, genetically coded monsters. They don't just kill, they repurpose. Grant's fists clenched. Briggs leaned forward. "We're planning a counterstrike. Targets a Thalrexian uplink tower near what's left of Houston. Take it out, scramble their transmissions, and slow the harvest. It's a suicide run." "I'm in," Grant said without hesitation. Briggs grinned, wolf-like. "Didn't finish the briefing." "You didn't need to." That night, Grant stared at the ceiling of his bunk, a metal cot in a concrete tomb lit by flickering emergency lights. He wasn't sleeping. Couldn't. The faces of his dead haunted him, but now they whispered something else. Make them pay. He thought about Janine. Her laugh, the way she used to throw her boots at him when he snored. He remembered the way she screamed his name when the sky exploded over Dagger Line, and her voice cracked through static right before the feed went dark. There was no grave, no closure. Only this. By morning, the team was assembled. 4 soldiers, Grant, Briggs, a demolitions expert named Cutter, a silent sniper called Knox, and a young hacker, barely 20, nicknamed Wire. They moved out before sunrise, riding a reinforced vehicle called the Reaper, a gutted military truck layered in alien plating and raw defiance. Every bump on the road was a reminder that Earth was broken, but not beaten. Their route was brutal. Thalrek's drones still prowled. They took 2 down with EMP shots, but the 3rd spotted them. It called in a seeker drone before Knox's bullet found its core. Too late. The seeker was a monster, 10 feet tall, all blades and eyes, screeching in a tone that made blood feel like ice. It landed behind them mid-drive, carving into the truck's rear axle with mechanical claws. Cutter jumped out first, lobbing a fusion grenade. The blast rocked the desert, but the seeker just stumbled. "Go!" Grant roared, diving from the cab. He met the machine head-on. Its blade sliced through his side, searing flesh and shattering a rib. But he didn't stop. He fired 3 rounds straight into its central processor. It screamed, died, and fell on top of him, pinning him under a ton of synthetic hate. Knox pulled him free, dragging him back into the Reaper. "You're insane," he muttered. "I've heard worse," Grant coughed, bleeding and laughing. They pushed on. By the time they reached the uplink site, the sun was bleeding over the scorched sky. The tower was visible, an obsidian spire jutting from the broken skyline, guarded by 2 alien walkers and a squad of bio-converted humans. The things had human faces stretched across synthetic bone, eyes hollow, mouths moving without words. Grant stepped out of the truck, checked his gear, and looked at the tower like a man staring at a devil's heart. "No mercy," he muttered. Briggs looked at him. No surrender. They moved like ghosts, silent, surgical. Cutter went for the western flank, planting charges. Knox took the high ground. Wire hacked into the local node, creating a brief blind spot. Grant moved straight into the storm. He took down 2 bio-soldiers with clean headshots, then rolled behind cover as a walker opened fire. Concrete exploded around him. He sprinted forward, diving between its legs, attaching an EMP mine to its undercarriage. The explosion fried its circuits, and the machine crashed sideways, crushing 3 more enemy soldiers under its bulk. The second walker advanced. Briggs got to it first, firing a rocket straight into its core. The blast lit the sky like a second dawn. Screams filled the air, human and not. Blood sprayed across alien metal. Smoke curled into the heavens like a warning. Grant kicked open the tower's door. Inside, the uplink pulsated with unholy light. Green, alien, alive. Wire ran past him, plugging in a spike. "It's transmitting," he yelled. "I can loop their data. Send out a false recall order." "Do it." Grant stood at the door, guarding the entrance as the tower began to quake from the inside. Wire's eyes went wide. "It's working! They think Earth is already consumed! They're calling back the harvest ships!" A deep tremor shook the ground. The tower began to collapse. "Time to go!" Briggs shouted. They ran, diving into the Reaper just as the spire exploded behind them, sending alien debris into the sky. They didn't look back. As they drove into the horizon, Grant looked out the window, side bleeding, vision blurring. But he smiled. For the first time since the massacre, Earth had struck back, and it wouldn't stop now. The desert stretched out in all directions, cracked like old skin under the weight of years without forgiveness. The Reaper rumbled across it, black smoke coughing from the hood, its tires spitting dust and blood-stained sand. Inside, nobody spoke, not because they didn't have words, but because everything had been said with bullets and fire. Grant sat in the rear of the truck, a rag soaked in antiseptic pressed hard against his bleeding side. Every jolt of the vehicle sent white pain screaming up his ribs, but he didn't flinch. Pain was familiar. It reminded him he was still here, still useful, still angry. Knox rode shotgun, silent as always, eyes constantly scanning the horizon through a cracked scope. The man rarely spoke more than 2 words at a time, but his rifle said plenty. Cutter sat beside the rear-mounted cannon, his fingers twitching, restless like a bomb waiting for someone to ask the wrong question. Wire, slouched over a half-fried datapad, typed furiously, still decoding alien signals pulled from the collapsed uplink. And Briggs drove like he had a score to settle with every inch of Earth the Thalrexians had desecrated. They were heading north, toward what used to be Denver. A Kilo 7 outpost had gone dark 3 days ago, and intel from the hacked transmission suggested the site had been targeted for early harvesting. The word made Grant's stomach churn. Harvest. The Thalrexians didn't even hide behind euphemisms. Humans were just livestock to them. Flesh for genetic splicing, neural data for their hive intelligences, reproductive material for twisted lab-born hybrid armies. Cutter broke the silence first. That tower didn't scream like the last one. Briggs snorted. Guess even the enemy's learning to die quietly. Good, Cutter muttered, checking his belt of makeshift grenades. I hate noise. Wire leaned back, exhausted. They're recalibrating. That fake recall signal. It worked, but it won't last. The upper orbitals are still running diagnostics. Once they realize the beacon was a lie... They'll come in harder, Grant finished for him. Yeah? Grant tossed the bloody rag out the window. Then we hit harder. They reached Denver by nightfall, or what was left of it. The skyline was jagged bones against a deep red dusk, buildings torn apart by orbital strikes and reassembled into strange, spiraling towers. It wasn't reconstruction. It was mutation. The Thalrexians weren't just destroying cities. They were rebuilding them into machines, living structures pulsing with biosynthetic tissue, buildings with veins, lights that blinked like eyes, roads that breathed. Knox muttered something under his breath. First time anyone had heard his voice in days. Briggs stopped the truck at the edge of the twisted remains of Interstate 70. Everyone out. We go in quiet. Full recon. Find the outpost. Find survivors, if there are any. They moved on foot, skirting the edges of alien territory. What used to be suburbia was now terrain from a nightmare. Trees melted into metal, cars fused into the road, homes with doorways that led to black nothingness. Grant moved ahead of the group, eyes sharp, rifle ready. That's when he heard it. A scream. Not animal, not alien. Human. He held up a fist, signaling the others to halt. The scream came again. Closer this time. Young. Female. He moved fast, breaking cover and rushing through the twisted alleyways of ruined Denver. He found her in a collapsed parking garage, no older than 16, bloody and barefoot, limping. Behind her, 2 bio-converted soldiers stalked forward, their movements jerky and unnatural. "Hey!" Grant bellowed, raising his rifle. The first one turned, mouth opening in a static hiss. He didn't give it a second chance. 2 shots, clean and fast. Head gone. The second charged, screeching, Grant sidestepped, drove a combat knife up into its throat, twisting as the creature spasmed, limbs flailing. It collapsed. He caught the girl before she fell. She was shaking. Pale, her hands covered in blood that wasn't hers. "Easy," he said. "You're safe." Her eyes locked on his. "You can't stop them. You don't understand. They're underneath." Before he could ask more, Briggs and the rest arrived. "Another survivor?" Cutter grunted. "Good. Was starting to think we'd wasted the drive." "She's in shock," Wire said, kneeling beside her. "We need to—" The ground rumbled. Then it cracked. Something burst from beneath the earth, a towering Thalrex construct, all jagged limbs and glowing cores. It had been buried there, waiting, lying in ambush. "Down!" Briggs yelled. The explosion shredded the pavement. Grant grabbed the girl and rolled behind cover as the monster opened fire. Plasma bolts scorched the air. Cutter threw a flash charge, blinding it momentarily. Knox took position on a high ledge, firing round after round into its exposed systems. But it was fast. Too fast. It leapt forward, crashing through a building and swatting Cutter into a wall like a rag doll. Blood sprayed. Bones cracked. He didn't move. Grant roared and charged. The thing turned, almost smiling. It was intelligent. Predatory. It saw his pain. It wanted it. Grant didn't care. He ducked under its arm, planted an explosive under its core, and fired 3 rounds straight into its sensor cluster. It screamed, high and mechanical, as the charge detonated, blowing out its center. It staggered, collapsed, and kept twitching like a dying insect. Knox jumped down, walked to the creature, and emptied his magazine into its skull. Silence returned, but the air was heavy. Cutter was dead. Wire confirmed it with a soft whisper. Briggs closed his eyes. That's the cost. They carried his body to what used to be a church, now a charred shell of faith. They buried him beneath the altar, marking it with a shattered piece of Thalrex armor. "No speeches," Grant said. "Just vengeance." The girl, her name was Naomi, finally spoke that night. "They took my family," she said. "Made me watch. Then they put me in one of the harvest pods. I escaped when the tower fell." "Why were they under the city?" Briggs asked. Naomi looked up, tears gone. "They're building a hive, something massive, underground, deep. They call it the Cradle. It's where they're growing the next wave." Grant's stomach turned. "Where?" She pointed east. "Under the old stadium, where the Broncos used to play." Wire confirmed it. Satellite pings, structural shifts, and faint Thalrex transmissions. There was something massive under Mile High. Briggs stood. "Then that's where we go next." Grant looked down at Cutter's grave, then towards the east. This wasn't about defense anymore. This was an exorcism. The entrance to the cradle wasn't guarded, not in the way Grant expected. There were no towers, no patrols, no visible defenses, just a gaping maw where the old stadium once stood, now twisted into a spiral of bone-like metal and flesh-veined steel. It descended into the earth like a wound that refused to heal. They stood at the edge of it, all 4 of them, Grant, Briggs, Knox, and Wire, staring down into the unknown. Naomi stayed behind at the ruins of the church, too weak to move. She had given them what they needed. The rest was on them. "You smell that?" Knox asked, voice low. Grant nodded. It was everywhere. Burnt ozone and rotting meat. The air down there wasn't just stale. It was wrong. It vibrated in the lungs, crawled down the throat like something alive. Briggs checked his gear. "Once we're down, we move fast. This isn't a siege. It's a strike. Hit the core. Get out. If we get out, Wire muttered, triple-checking his EMP beacons. Grant didn't bother speaking. He led the way. They descended into the cradle through what used to be a player's tunnel, now torn open into a spiraling corridor of twitching cables and flesh-wrapped beams. The ground beneath them pulsed. There were no lights, but the walls glowed, not from bulbs or LEDs, but from within. Bioluminescent tissue, veins carrying something viscous that throbbed with every heartbeat of the hive. It wasn't just a structure. It was alive. They reached a chamber nearly a mile beneath the surface. Here, the scale became clear. Eggs, hundreds of them, each the size of a man. Translucent shells filled with suspended bodies, humans in various states of transformation. Some still looked human, their faces frozen in terror. Others didn't. Limbs extended, skin peeled into plates, eyes replaced by lenses. Wire nearly puked. Knox just raised his rifle. Grant stepped forward. One of the eggs twitched, then another. Then all of them. "They know," he said. A scream erupted from the far wall, a scream that was part animal, part machine, part human. From the shadows came the first guardian, not a drone, not a soldier, something worse. It used to be a man, huge, bald, with skin stretched over black exoskeletal plates. One arm had been replaced by a massive organic cannon, the other dripped with long, scythe-like blades. His face was still human, barely, lips sewn into a grimace, eyes replaced by glass. But Grant knew him. "Granger," he whispered. "Commandant Granger?" He had served under Granger. A hero. A man who once told a young Grant that fear was just a tool, that no war was unwinnable. Now he was a tool of the enemy. The creature charged. Grant didn't hesitate. He fired a full clip into Granger's chest. It staggered, snarled, kept coming. Briggs hurled a frag grenade. The explosion sent bio-goo flying across the chamber, but it didn't stop the thing. Knox took a shot to its right eye. The lens shattered. That got its attention. It roared, leapt, grabbed Wire by the throat. "No!" Grant roared, diving forward. He slammed into the creature, forcing its cannon arm off balance. Wire collapsed, choking. Grant twisted the creature's neck with all his strength, then slammed a combat knife into the base of its spine. It shrieked, so loud the walls vibrated. Then Knox planted another shot between its eyes. This one hit something vital. Granger's corpse dropped, and with it, the eggs screamed. The chamber came alive. From the walls, ceiling, and floor, things slithered out, part Thalrexian, part human. Crawling, clicking, howling. The cradle wasn't just an incubation chamber. It was a hive, a nursery, and now it was awake. "Back!" Briggs shouted. They retreated through the nearest corridor, firing as they moved. Wire laid down 3 EMP mines. The creatures behind them howled in pain as the blasts detonated. But it wasn't enough. More were coming. Always more. They reached a central core, massive and pulsing, suspended by webbing. It looked like a heart the size of a bus, with wires and tendrils running out into the hive. Beneath it, a pool of liquid shimmered, deep red and full of half-digested bodies. "This is it!" Wire yelled, pulling out the last charge. "We take this out. We cripple the entire cradle." Grant moved to cover him. "How long?" 2 minutes. Briggs and Knox held the front. Dozens of shapes poured down the tunnel. Twisted humanoids, drone hybrids, crawling monstrosities with multiple arms and no faces. They fought like demons. Knox didn't miss a shot. Each bullet claimed a head, an arm, a heart. Briggs fought with a fury Grant had never seen. Fists, blades, teeth if he had to. But they were outnumbered, and even demons get tired. A creature lunged at Wire. Grant intercepted it with his shoulder, took it down, and crushed its head under his boot. "1 minute!" Wire screamed. Knox took a blade to the leg. He fell, but kept firing. Briggs got gored across the chest. Deep. He staggered back, coughing blood, but didn't stop swinging. The horde was almost on top of them. "Go!" Wire screamed. "It's armed! We've got 30 seconds!" Grant grabbed Knox, threw his arm over his shoulder. "Briggs!" The old soldier looked at them. Bleeding. Broken. He shook his head. "I'll hold them." "You'll die," Grant said. "Then I'll take more with me. Get out, Mercer. Finish this war." Grant wanted to argue, but he didn't. He nodded once. "Make it count." Briggs turned and charged the horde with a scream that split the dark. The last Grant saw of him was a blur of blades, gunfire, and blood. Then they ran. They made it up 2 levels before the entire hive shook. The explosion was biblical. A shockwave of heat and light roared up through the corridors, incinerating everything behind them. The hive screamed in death. They burst out of the tunnel into the night sky as fire belched behind them, turning the cradle into a pillar of hellfire. They hit the ground, gasping. Alive, broken. But alive. Behind them, Denver burned again. This time for the right reasons. Grant lay on his back, staring at the stars. His body hurt in places he didn't know could hurt. Knox's leg was shredded. Wire was barely conscious. But they had done it. Another blow, a real one. They weren't just fighting anymore. They were winning. The silence after the cradle's destruction wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet you feel just before a storm shreds the sky open. Grant lay in the dirt, coughing smoke, ribs broken, face coated in ash and blood that wasn't all his. Every breath felt like chewing glass. But he was alive. That was becoming a curse. Knox groaned beside him, trying to move with a leg that barely qualified as attached anymore. Wire lay motionless for a moment, then sat up with a wild gasp, like someone pulled from a drowning. His face was pale, eyes wide, hands trembling. No one spoke for several minutes. The fire behind them raged, and Denver's sky was black with smoke and glowing embers. What had been the Thalrexian cradle was now nothing but a collapsing hole, the hive structure dead, burning from the inside out. Still, Grant didn't trust it to stay buried. "Check him," Grant said, nodding at Knox. Wire crawled over, wincing with every movement. Bullet grazed the femur, ligament damage, might have nicked an artery. "Will he walk?" Wire shook his head. Knox answered anyway, spitting into the dust. "Don't need to walk, just need to kill." Grant almost smiled. Almost. They camped for the night on the edge of a ruined suburb, under the remains of a school gym that had half collapsed but still offered shelter from aerial scans. The drones would be looking now. After what they'd just done, the Thalrexians wouldn't be silent for long. Briggs was gone. His name echoed in Grant's mind like a drumbeat. The man had gone out like a damn legend, buying them the seconds they needed to cripple an entire biofactory. But that didn't make it easier. Briggs was a brother, a fighter, and now he was just another ghost in the dirt. They didn't speak about him. Not yet. Some pain was too raw to pick at. Wire broke the silence first. That core we destroyed wasn't just processing humans. It was learning from them. Neural mapping, personality breakdowns, behavioral profiles. They were creating a way to predict resistance. Grant stiffened. Like building a copy of Earth's will, so they can kill it before it fights back. Wire nodded. They weren't just studying us, they were dissecting our souls. Knox loaded another clip into his rifle. Then we burn their gods next. They stayed only long enough to tend wounds, wrap injuries, and consume a ration that tasted like cardboard and regret. Then they moved. Grant fashioned a makeshift crutch for Knox out of metal piping and duct tape. The man didn't complain once. Their next destination was a refugee outpost called Bastion 3, roughly 70 miles northeast. If there were any Kylo 7 units left active in the sector, they'd be converging there. And if there was even a whisper of a working satellite uplink, they'd need it to spread word of the Cradle's destruction. The world had to know the monsters could bleed. The road was a graveyard. Burned-out tanks, looted convoys, bones picked clean. Thalrex banners hung from broken bridges, spidery symbols written in a language no one fully understood. They weren't meant to be read. They were meant to terrify. Grant spat on everyone they passed. They encountered survivors along the way. A group of 10 huddled in the basement of a collapsed mall, too afraid to speak. Wire patched up their sick, shared what little antibiotics they had. Grant left them with 2 pistols and a warning. "Don't pray for help," he said. "Become the help." Some nodded. Others just stared. On the 3rd day, the sky changed. A black object passed overhead, long, silent, alien, a Thalrexian orbital scout. It didn't fire, didn't pause, but it saw them. They knew it. There was no point hiding. Earth wasn't theirs anymore. The sky belonged to the enemy. Bastion 3 wasn't a base. It was a crater. The outpost had been leveled, not by conventional weapons, but something worse. The soil was dead, blackened glass where the ground had melted, twisted corpses fused into the rock. There was no fire, no smoke, just absence, like something had erased the area from existence. "What the hell did this?" Wire whispered. Grant knelt beside a half-melted Kilo 7 helmet. "They used a soul burner." Knox grunted. "Didn't think those were real." "They weren't," Grant said, "not until now." Soul burners were theoretical weapons. Tech that didn't destroy with heat or radiation, but with energy tuned to human biofrequency. It erased memory, thought, will. You didn't just die. You were undone, vaporized from history. They were too late. Wire found a data shard embedded in a scorched drone frame, spent an hour decoding it while the others watched the horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "The Thalrexians just sent a signal from orbit to every planet they control." Wire turned the pad around. On it was a single phrase, translated roughly from Thalrex symbiocode. "Earth's resistance has evolved, initiating harvest phase Omega." "What does that mean?" Knox asked. Wire's hands trembled. "It means they're done studying us. Now they're coming to finish us." The plan changed. No more outposts, no more waiting. They would hit the source. Wire had one lead, a black site called Echo 9, buried in the Appalachian Mountains. Before the fall, it had been a deep storage facility for experimental human tech. AI, bioweapons, experimental flight systems. Most thought it had been destroyed in the first wave. But Wire found a recent ping. A signal only someone from Earth would use. "Someone's still alive down there," he said. "Someone smart." They set course the next morning. The journey east was savage. Storms rolled through, thick black clouds that dropped acid rain and scrambled comms. They had to take shelter in the ruins of a prison, fighting off wild dogs and feral civilians who thought murder was the only law left. Grant killed 3 men that night. One had been no older than 17. He didn't blink. The boy had tried to kill Knox with a jagged pipe. That was all that mattered. By the 6th day, they reached the edge of the Appalachians. The trees here hadn't died, but they weren't natural anymore. They grew wrong, twisted. Some had eyes. Others bled sap that hissed when it hit the ground. The Thalrexians had seeded the forest with corruption. Echo 9 was hidden beneath a waterfall. They found the entrance buried under rubble and biotic growth. Grant pried the door open with a crowbar, ignoring the way the metal screamed. Inside was darkness, cold and sterile. The first human structure they'd seen intact in weeks. They descended cautiously. Lights flickered on. Red. Emergency backup systems. They passed old containment rooms, shattered lab tanks, dried blood on walls. No bodies, just echoes. Voices still screamed from half-active intercoms, recordings, warning tones, corrupted messages. Then came the voice. Female. Alive. "Identify yourselves," it said, cracked with static. Grant raised his voice. "Major Grant Mercer, Kilo 7, survivors of the Cradle Strike. We're here to finish what you started." A pause. Then, "Welcome to Echo 9. Doors opened, lights came on, and standing at the end of the corridor was a woman in tactical gear, armed with a weapon that looked part human, part alien. Her face was scarred, her eyes sharp. She wasn't surprised to see them. "I'm Commander Halbrook," she said, "and I've been waiting for someone like you." Grant stepped forward. "Then let's end this war." Echo 9 wasn't built for survival. It was built for desperation. Everything in its walls felt older than war, older than reason. The corridors were narrow and low, laced with reinforced alloys and woven tech veins that hadn't seen daylight in decades. It smelled sterile, but wrong, like something pretending to be clean, but rotting underneath. Commander Halbrook didn't waste time with greetings. She walked fast, rifle at the ready, leading Grant, Knox, and Wire through the underground facility with military precision. Her uniform was patchwork, old UN tactical gear mixed with alien-fused armor plates. Her eyes, steely gray, never blinked for too long. "You said you survived the cradle," she said over her shoulder. "What did you see?" "Enough," Grant replied. "Human bodies growing inside alien tech, consciousness transfer, a damn nursery for hybrid killers." Halbrook didn't stop walking. "Then you understand why we can't win with bullets." Grant glanced at Wire. "We've been winning just fine so far." Halbrook stopped. She turned and held up a small sphere, dark and humming. "This isn't about winning, it's about erasing. You kill a drone, 10 more get printed. You burn a cradle, they build 3 more in orbit. They don't sleep, they don't grieve, they don't forget." Wire stepped closer, eyes wide. "That's Thalrexian neural ink. That's not supposed to exist." Halbrook nodded. "We stole it, 12 years ago, before the sky fell. Echo 9 was a lab to reverse engineer their minds, to learn how to think like them." Knox grunted. "And what? You turned into them?" She didn't answer that, just walked deeper into the dark. They reached a massive chamber, vaulted ceilings, filled with suspended tanks glowing green. Inside them were brains, human ones, floating, wired into massive alien processors. The sight made Grant's blood run cold. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "Volunteers," Halbrook said. "High IQ soldiers, scientists, strategists. Before the first wave hit, they uploaded their consciousness into Thalrex-compatible matrices. We created a hybrid mind, one that could learn like them, adapt like them." "You made an AI," Wire whispered, "with human souls." "We made a weapon," Halbrook corrected. Knox stared at the tanks. "You buried your best minds in machines. Did it work?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she led them into another room, this one sealed by biometric locks. It opened with a hiss, revealing a command center lined with dusty screens, each flickering with alien script and war map overlays. On the central monitor, a face flickered into view. It wasn't human, not fully. The eyes were black voids. The skin was a patchwork of digital distortion, but the voice was calm, male, familiar. "Major Mercer," it said. Grant stepped back. "I know that voice." Wire's jaw clenched. "It's a ghost file, pieced together from your old CO's memory banks." The face nodded. "We've been watching, analyzing your resistance movements, your tactics, your rage. You're a variable the Thalrexians failed to predict." "You're spying on us?" Grant growled. "I'm preparing you." Grant turned to Halbrook. "This thing is planning our war without us?" "This thing," she said, "has been keeping the Thalrexian overmind from accessing the last global defense protocol. Without it, the orbital AI will purge the entire biosphere." Wire swallowed. "The BlackNet satellites, the K-bomb grid." Halbrook nodded. "One command and it turns Earth into a graveyard. This AI's been stalling them, buying us time." Grant crossed his arms. "Time for what?" The AI answered. "For you. To reach us. To make a decision." A schematic flickered to life. It showed the Earth, surrounded by Thalrexian ships. Then it zoomed in on a single beacon, deep underground, somewhere near Greenland. "The original seed ship," the AI said. "The source of their signal, the origin node. If we destroy that, the hive mind will collapse into chaos. No signal, no coordination, no overmind." Wire's eyes widened. "It's suicide. That node is protected by their oldest constructs, the kind we've never even seen." "That's why it has to be you," the AI said. "You're unpredictable. Human dot." Grant exhaled slowly. "What's the catch?" Halbrook turned to him. "We've got the location. We've got a dropship, but we need someone to deliver the payload. Direct contact. Manual detonation." Knox's voice was hoarse. "You mean someone has to die with it?" Halbrook looked Grant in the eyes. "It has to be someone they can't predict." Grant didn't flinch. "I'll go." Wire stepped forward. "Wait, Number, there has to be another way." "There isn't," Halbrook said. "This is the endgame." Knox shook his head. "Not yet. If we go out, we take more with us." Halbrook nodded. "Then we'll hit them on two fronts. You and Wire will sabotage their orbital array. Grant goes to Greenland. We pull the trigger together." Grant looked at the AI. "You better be right about this." The thing didn't smile, didn't blink. It just said, "Humanity's strength was never in numbers. It was in defiance." The next 2 days were preparation. Halbrook equipped them with stolen Thalrex armor, modified weapons, and a stealth-capable ship ripped from alien blueprints. The payload, codenamed Judgment, was a fusion bomb wrapped in quantum disruptors. A hybrid of Earth's most dangerous tech and everything they'd learned from the enemy. One touch would obliterate the node and corrupt the hive's memory core. No reset, no recovery, total collapse. The night before launch, Grant sat alone in the medbay, staring at his hands. They were covered in scars, burned, broken, still shaking from old injuries. He could feel every death in them. Janine's face came to him in flashes. She would have told him not to be a hero. She'd begged him to run that day at Daggerline, to live for something instead of dying for everyone. But now there was nothing left to live for, only something to die with. Halbrook entered, silent. "Still time to back out," she said. "No, there isn't," Grant replied. She handed him a dog tag, one of Briggs. He said you'd understand. Grant looked at it, didn't say a word, just closed his fingers around it. Tell your ghost machine to get ready, he said. The ship cut through the sky like a whispered curse, black, angular, and silent as death. It had no name. Grant didn't want to give it one. It was just a coffin with wings, and he was the payload. Inside, the air was thin, pressurized by barely functioning hybrid systems scavenged from Thalrexian wreckage. The dashboard flickered in a mix of human text and alien glyphs, spitting warnings Grant didn't understand and didn't care to. The only thing he focused on was the countdown. 73 minutes to touchdown. Greenland's surface below was a frozen wasteland, cracked open by the landing of the first seed ship. What Earth now knew was the origin node of the hive signal. The place pulsed like a heart, its towers made of bone and glass, stretching toward the clouds like fingers clawing at the stars. The core pulsed beneath it all, deep underground, untouchable except by someone willing to bleed all the way to it. That someone was him. Back at Echo 9, Wire and Knox prepared for their half of the plan. A simultaneous strike on the Thalrexian orbital array that relayed overmind commands to every drone and bio unit on the planet. If the uplink wasn't fried before Grant reached the core, the hive would recognize his approach and activate defensive protocols no one could survive. So it had to be perfect. As he passed into lower orbit, the comms crackled to life. Grant, Wire said, voice thin and warped by distance. We're going dark in 2, getting close to their relay tower. Once we're in, you've got an 11-minute window to get to the core before the signal loops back. Copy, Grant said. Don't get cute, just get it done. Same to you. Knox came on briefly. If you see Briggs in hell, tell him I took 5 more with me. The comms died. Alone again. Grant checked the harness over the bomb strapped to his chest. Judgment was humming now, synced to his biosignature. If he died early, the timer would trigger. If he reached the core and hit the switch manually, it would detonate instantly. He hoped for the latter, but he wasn't betting on it. The ship's hull rattled as it entered lower atmosphere. The sky turned to fire outside the viewports. The Thalrexian seed ship loomed closer now, an abomination of design, grown more than built, its surface alive with writhing conduits and twitching limbs. It looked like a cathedral made of bones and teeth. No defenses activated. Yet, the stealth tech held. The ship slammed into the ice with bone-crushing force. Everything went black. When Grant came to, he was half buried in snow, ears ringing, chest screaming from the impact. He crawled out, dragging Judgment with him, coughing blood into the frost. His left leg was numb, shoulder dislocated. Didn't matter. The Overmind node rose in front of him, an obsidian tower stretching into the gray sky, its base burrowed into a crevice of twisting rock and alien sinew. He limped toward it without hesitation. A tunnel waited. No guards, no traps. That scared him more than anything. Inside, the walls pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm. Green veins glowed faintly. He followed them deeper, passing what looked like pods, each containing humanoid shapes. Maybe new bioconverts, maybe worse. Their eyes moved under closed lids, watching him even in stasis. He moved faster. His comms buzzed. Static. Then Wire's voice broke through. We're in. Hit the primary uplink. Signal's dropping. Now's your shot. Grant gritted his teeth. Copy. Moving. He reached a central chamber, a vertical shaft with a spiraling path down. At the bottom, the core pulsed, a sphere the size of a tank, floating above a pit of writhing tendrils and liquid light. No alarms, no movement. Grant didn't trust it. He descended fast, slipping more than once, pain screaming through his body, but the rage in him kept him upright. Janine's face, Briggs' last stand, Cutter's broken body, Knox's silence, Wyer's quiet fear. All of it burned inside him like fire in his lungs. He reached the bottom, stepped into the platform. The core reacted. Tendrils shot out, hundreds, wrapping around him, lifting him off the ground. Judgment beeped rapidly. Shit! The tendrils didn't attack. They read. His memories poured into them. Dagger Line. The massacre. His team. Janine's death. Briggs' face. Every scream, every kill, every failure. Then a voice filled his skull. Not mechanical, not alien. You should have run, it said. It was his own voice. Twisted, echoing. You came all this way to die like a fool. He screamed in rage and pain, pulling against the tendrils, pressing the bomb closer to the core. They tightened, crushed his ribs. Blood poured from his nose. You're just meat, the voice said. Meat with delusions. No, Grant hissed. I'm the end. He slammed the bomb into the core. Everything froze. The tendrils twitched. The light blinked. The voice stuttered. No, wait. Grant forced his thumb down on the manual trigger. The last thing he heard was his own voice saying, For Earth. Then the world exploded. The pulse rippled across the planet like a scream. The Thalrexian hive mind fractured, its signal severed. Drones dropped mid-stride. Bio-units convulsed and collapsed. In orbit, Wyer and Knox watched the tower crumble from their stolen craft. In the ruins of New Berlin, survivors looked up as the sky turned from gray to gold for the first time in years. The war wasn't over. But Earth had just made its loudest statement. You don't get to win. The ash settled for days. In the silence that followed the detonation of the origin node, Earth was a graveyard with a sky that had forgotten how to scream. No more drone swarms, no orbiting harvesters, no hive pulses humming through the soil like a second heartbeat. Just quiet. And corpses. Wyer stood at the edge of a broken ridge outside what used to be Reykjavik, staring at the crater where Grant had made his final stand. There was nothing left of the seed ship, just scorched ice and a heat that hadn't faded even after 5 days. The surrounding glaciers had cracked and melted into rivers that now carved new paths through the old war zones. Beside him, Knox leaned heavily on a metal crutch, one leg gone, the other barely keeping up. He didn't complain. Never had. But something in his eyes was different now. The hard edge had dulled, not softened, but sunk inward. The rage wasn't gone. It was just buried under layers of something heavier. Anything? Knox asked, staring into the steam. Wyer shook his head. Not even a trace of the signal. He did it. It's gone. All of it. Knox nodded, almost respectfully. Mercer was a bastard, but he got it done. They stood in silence. All around the world, the collapse of the overmind left chaos. Some bio-units fell and never moved again. Others spasmed violently, tearing themselves apart. Entire Thalrexian hives liquefied, their organic structures unable to function without the core signal. But not everything died. Scattered pockets of resistance had started clearing out the ruins, neutralizing half-dead drones, securing former breeding chambers, and torching corrupted forest zones. People who had hidden for years were crawling back into the light, but they didn't cheer. There were no parades, just questions. Who's left? What happens now? And above all, was it really over? Wyer didn't have those answers. All he had were the numbers. His datapad still synced with the last operational satellites. What it showed wasn't comforting. Global infrastructure was shattered, food systems gone, oceans rising, contaminated zones stretching for hundreds of miles. The Thalrexian presence had warped Earth itself. This wasn't just post-war. This was post-everything. He and Knox returned to what remained of Echo 9, less a base now than a collection of tents and cracked walls. Halbrook had survived, though barely. Half her team hadn't. She now led what passed as command. A group of tired survivors, ragged engineers, ex-soldiers, and children too young to remember the old Earth. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were rebuilders. But nobody wanted that job. Inside the main tent, Halbrook stood over a map of the northern hemisphere, black markers stabbing into key Thalrexian collapse points. "Nodes in the Pacific still showing activity," she muttered. "Low-level echoes, autonomous behaviors." Wire frowned. "How's that possible? The overmind's gone." She looked up. They were building redundancies, splinter intelligences, backup minds. They didn't trust themselves to win either. Knox coughed and spit into a bucket. "So we're still fighting?" Halbrook stared at the map. "We're always fighting." Later that night, Wire found an old file. It was encrypted, buried deep inside the remains of the AI Grant had spoken with, the one that used his old CO's voice. It was a message, time-stamped 3 hours before the node strike. He almost deleted it. Instead, he played it. Grant's voice came through, raw and tired. "If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it, and I probably didn't. No regrets. I had my time. Took enough lives. It's fair I paid it back." A pause. "I didn't do this for victory. That word means nothing now. I did it so the next generation can live without having to kill to feel human." Another pause. Longer this time. "They'll ask if I was a hero. Don't let them. I was a broken man with nothing left but hate. But sometimes, that's enough to get the job done." Static. Then a final whisper. "Keep fighting, not for war, for peace worth bleeding for." The file ended. Wire sat in silence, tears on his face for a man he'd only half understood, but had come to respect like a brother. The kind of man who doesn't wait for permission. The kind who walks into hell because someone has to. 2 weeks later, they held a ceremony. No flags, no speeches. Just a burned dog tag placed atop a pile of Thalrexian bones in the heart of what had once been a cradle. Survivors gathered around, faces hollow but eyes sharp. Kids watched, not really understanding, but knowing that something had shifted. Wire spoke briefly. "He gave us a chance. That's all he owed us. The rest is ours to figure out." Knox lit the fire. They watched the pile burn until morning. Earth didn't recover. Not really. It limped forward. Some cities were reclaimed. Others were left to rot, swallowed by forest or desert or the warped biomes the Thalrexians had seeded. Agriculture returned slowly. Power grids flickered back to life. Not enough to call it a revival, but enough to call it survival. A new council formed. Soldiers, scientists, civilians, even ex-scavengers. No presidents, no generals. Just people who understood that Earth didn't need kings. It needed guardians. Knox helped train a new defensive force. Lean, mean, no politics. Just grit. Wire rebuilt the EchoNet, a scattered communication web powered by old satellites and refurbished drones. He called it the Mercer Relay. They never found Grant's body, but they found his legacy. In every child who no longer had to sleep under bunkers, in every sunrise not blotted out by swarm clouds, in every whisper that humanity had done the impossible. They had made the monsters afraid. Years later, a statue was built in the ruins of Daggerline. Not of a man, just a pair of boots, a shattered rifle, and a simple inscription carved in stone. No mercy, no surrender. And beneath it, carved by a child's hand, we remember.